The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Yesterday, the Young Turks' Emma Vigeland explained how Barack Obama is behind the latest onslaught, the cabal that has disrupted the Bernie Sanders campaign. Marianne Williamson says former candidates endorsing Biden was a coup. It's a USA Today article by Savannah Behrman. Author and former Democratic candidate Marianne Williamson called it a coup that former candidates threw their support behind former Vice President Joe Biden. In a since-deleted tweet, Williamson also went after pundits, calling Biden's campaign a resurrection. She endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders in February and has been campaigning on his behalf at some events. After performing poorly in Iowa and New Hampshire, Biden dominated South Carolina. Shortly after, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg dropped out and decided to endorse Biden. Former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke, who also ran for the Democratic nomination, additionally threw his support behind the former vice president Tuesday night. In the deleted tweet, Ezra Klein said, "This kind of thinking is a bigger problem for the Bernie Sanders operation than I think people realize. If you treat voters and officials in the party you want to lead as the enemy, a lot of people in that party aren't going to trust you to lead them." I've been getting that a lot lately. So Marianne Williamson comes back. Jake Tapper referred to the resurrection of Joe Biden's campaign. This was not a resurrection. It was a coup. Russiagate was not a coup. Mueller was not a coup. Impeachment was not a coup. What happened yesterday was a coup, and we will push back. That's what I'm talking about. Biden went on to win many Super Tuesday states, trouncing Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders in some areas he had won in 2016. Williams pushed out an additional tweet Tuesday night that the moderates did not organically fall into place behind Biden today. What happened was the result of a strategized, orchestrated plan to block someone deemed inconvenient to the political establishment, she continued. So Marianne Williamson is right. It was a coup. It was organized, and Obama organized it. He was the string puller, and the parade of new candidates this time were all the puppets on the strings. I've been detailing how the cabal works over the last months. We have the CIA involvement. We have Hollywood involvement, all of those players in the game I've been talking about over the months, so you can go back and read and watch what I've said. But let's just say for sure that Obama was leading this cabal. Everyone else was falling in line rapidly behind his instructions, and in a matter of 72 hours, everything changed. Meanwhile, the typical dirty tricks were happening in Texas that have happened in other places in 2016.
I will say, we had talked about this a little bit earlier. In Texas, McLennan County, home to Waco, Texas, closed 44% of its polling places between 2012 and 2018. During that time, its population grew by more than 15,000 people, more than two-thirds of that growth, African American and Latino population growth. In the 50 counties that gained the most Black and Latino population between 2012 and 2018, those are populations where the counties where the population rose by 2.5 million people. Texas, between 2012 and 2018, closed 542 of the polling places in those 50 counties.
Wonder why they do a thing like that.
This is something that is systematically underway in Texas. Texas is not the only state that is contending with this, and Texas is not the only state with lines tonight, but some of this is deliberate.
No shit, Sherlock. Well, Rachel got that one right. So the Democratic Party is rigged as fuck, and that's what we're dealing with. Again, voter suppression is an ugly business, no matter who's doing it. And it's no secret whom those Black and Latino voters would prefer in the state of Texas, and in the state of New Mexico, in the state of Arizona, in the state of Nevada, and in the state of California, just to name a few. She said that the population has been growing, and the Latino population is growing the fastest of all. So it's clear this is a concerted effort over years, not just to stop Bernie Sanders, but to stop the progressive movement that includes working class families. This is an orchestrated movement to keep the people from getting power to change things. Meanwhile, who's leading the charge to support the corporatists? Dems converge around dementia-addled warmonger ahead of Super Tuesday. Back in January, well before the Democratic primary race had taken on its current composition, independent journalist Ruth Ann Oskolkoff reported that a source had heard from high-level Democratic Party insiders that they were planning to install Joe Biden as the party's nominee and to smear Bernie Sanders as a Russian asset. I covered that back in January when it happened. On January 20th, 2020 at 8:20 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, I received a communication from a reliable source, Oskolkoff wrote. This person had interactions earlier that evening with high-level party members and associates of the Democratic National Committee who said that they have now selected Biden as the Democratic Party nominee with Warren as the VP. They also said the plan is to smear Bernie as a Russian asset. Now, immediately before Super Tuesday, it's now immediately after Super Tuesday, we are seeing establishment candidates Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar drop out of the race, both of whom, along with former candidate Beto O'Rourke, are now suddenly endorsing Biden. Elizabeth Warren, the only top-level candidate besides Sanders who could be labeled vaguely left by any stretch of the imagination, has meanwhile outraged progressives by remaining in the race to the Vermont senator's detriment. The day before Super Tuesday also saw the Daily Beast, whose corporate owner IAC has Chelsea Clinton on its board of directors, publishing an article titled "Kremlin Media Still Like Bernie 'Cause They Love Trump," which aggressively smears Sanders as a tool of the Kremlin. Look at that picture. They even painted his skin a little bit redder. This latter development is becoming a conspicuously common line of attack against Sanders, and while we're on the subject, also tracks with the prediction made by journalist Max Blumenthal back in July of 2017. Blumenthal told Fox's Tucker Carlson that this Russian hysteria will be repurposed by the political establishment to attack the left and anyone on the left. A Bernie Sanders-like politician who steps out of line on the issues of permanent war or corporate free trade, things like that, will be painted as Russia puppets. So this is very dangerous, and people who are progressive, who are falling into it, need to know what the long-term consequences of this cynical narrative are. So we're seeing things unfold exactly as some have predicted. We're seeing the clear frontrunner smeared as a tool of Vladimir Putin, accompanied by a deluge of op-eds and think pieces from all the usual warmongering mass media narrative managers, calling on so-called moderates to rally around the former vice president on Super Tuesday. Sanders has not been pulling in anywhere near the numbers he'd need to pull to prevent a contested convention. This means that even if he gets more votes than any of his primary opponents, party leaders can still overrule those votes and appoint Biden as their nominee to run against Trump. Establishment spinmeisters, as well as all Sanders' primary opponents, have been working to normalize this ahead of time. A tweet by Bill Kristol. Whatever the case for either Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, neither is going to be the nominee, and it's not going to be Mike Bloomberg either. So it's Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. The only problem? Biden's brain is turning into sauerkraut. There are two new clips of video footage making the rounds today, one featuring Biden at a rally telling his supporters that tomorrow is Super Thursday, and another featuring the former VP saying, and this is a direct quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by the, you know the thing." I've written about Biden's recent struggles to form coherent sentences before, and it seems to be getting worse. There's simply no comparing the befuddled, fuzz-brained man we see before us today with the sharp, lucid speaker we were seeing even a few years ago. The man's brain does not work. And yeah, it's unpleasant to have to keep pointing this out. I'm not loving it myself. I resent Biden's handlers and the Democratic Party establishment for making it necessary to continually point out an old man's obvious symptoms of cognitive decline, but it does need to be pointed to, and it's creepy and weird that they're continuing to prop up this crumbling husk of a man while pretending that everything's fine. Crystal ball quote. Imagine putting all your eggs in the Joe Biden basket.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
He's a horrible war hawk with an inexcusable track record of advancing right-wing policies, but even rank-and-file Americans who don't pay attention to that stuff would plainly see a man on the debate stage opposite Trump who shouldn't be permitted near a pair of scissors, much less the nuclear codes, and Trump will happily point that out. It's been obvious since 2016 that the Dems were going to once again sabotage the only candidate with a chance of beating Trump in favor of a scandalously inappropriate candidate, but wheeling out an actual literal dementia patient for the role is something not even I would have imagined. 2020 is weird, folks, and it's going to get a whole lot weirder. Buckle up. Now, here's a stark contrast in Joe Biden's cognitive abilities. This is Joe Biden 4 years ago.
You know, if Bernie Sanders never said he was a democratic socialist, based on what he's saying, people wouldn't be calling him a democratic socialist. That's how he characterizes himself in sort of European terms, the democratic socialist parties in Europe.
But why is she having trouble?
Well, I think that...
She being Hillary Clinton. Why is she having trouble with Bernie?
That Bernie is speaking to a yearning that is deep and real, and he has credibility on it. And that is the absolute enormous concentration of wealth in a small group of people with the middle class now being able to be shown being left out. There used to be a basic bargain. If you contributed to the profitability of an enterprise, you got to share in the profit. That's been broken. Productivity's up. Wages are stagnant.
Hillary's talking about that as
well. It's relatively new for Hillary to talk about that. Hillary's focus has been on other things up to now, and that's been Bernie's. No one questions Bernie's authenticity on those issues.
And they question hers, you think?
Well, I think they question everybody's who hasn't been talking about it all along. But I think she's come forward with some really, really thoughtful approaches to deal with the issue. But I just think, and look, you know, everybody, you know, it's the old thing. Everybody wants to be the favorite. No one wants to be the prohibitive favorite. Mm-hmm. And so it's an awful high bar for her to meet, that she was the absolute prohibitive favorite. I never thought she was a prohibitive favorite. I don't think she ever thought she was a prohibitive favorite. So I think it's, you know, everything's sort of coming down to earth.
So that illustrates a couple of things. It illustrates that he understands Hillary's weaknesses, and he should understand his own relative to this movement that Bernie's been leading for years and years. Joe is no more qualified to lead this movement than was Hillary, and yet Joe is the anointed candidate. Elizabeth is staying in to help Joe win. Everyone else is dropping out to help Joe win. It's the establishment against Bernie Sanders, and it's the establishment against all the rest of us. But if you can hear the 4-year difference in Joe's cognitive abilities, you should understand the next 4 years, it's not going to go up again. That's not how things work. Now here's Bernie making the same point Joe just made in his own words. Organized money versus organized people. New Sanders memo details stark choice between Biden and Bernie. This is a Common Dreams article by Jake Johnson. Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign sent a memo to staffers and surrogates Monday evening spotlighting stark policy differences between Sanders and Joe Biden on Social Security, trade, and other major issues after the former vice president received a wave of high-profile endorsements on the eve of Super Tuesday. The memo, authorized by Sanders campaign manager Fez Shakir and senior advisor Jeff Weaver, characterizes Biden's endorsements from Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid as part of an effort by the former vice president to coalesce the Washington establishment and its big donors around his campaign to protect the status quo. Heading into Super Tuesday, the memo continues, the choice in the Democratic primary is now crystal clear. Voters face a decision between Bernie's working class movement and his message of change, and Biden's effort to, in his own words, make sure that nothing will fundamentally change for the billionaire class that buys elections. With Biden bankrolled by a super PAC and boosted by billionaire donors, the primary is far from over, the document declares. We are now entering the phase of the primary in which the differences between Bernie and Biden will take center stage. Bernie spoke with Elizabeth about whether she should drop out, and she told him that she'll think about it. It's clear that we're not the only ones thinking she should drop out. Bernie also thinks she should drop out, but I have predicted before that you're not going to see that. She's not in it to defeat Donald Trump. She's in it to defeat Bernie. I'll let you read this yourself. Time magazine article, Greenpeace gives Joe Biden a D- on climate change, a well-deserved D-. and I'll let you read that one yourself. And I'll close with a post in Berniecrats, a Facebook group, by Snipey Jackson. I need to apologize to some other Bernie supporters. For the last 3 to 4 weeks, I got into heated debates about trying to unify the party, agreeing that if Bernie loses legitimately, like that would happen, we need to support the winning candidate. I talked about hating the take your ball and go home philosophy, shamed Bernie folks for saying fuck it, Bernie or bust, but I'm fucking back. With the swing of Beto, Amy, and Buttigieg, with how the media is trying to fuck Bernie, with how bad he is getting cheated, I'm all in, and this is my apology. I got kicked out of the biggest Bernie Sanders Facebook group for saying I support Bernie and Warren and want progressives to unite. I didn't kick her out, by the way. I was downplaying how bad the system is trying to railroad him, and I was being dismissive of some of you guys' feelings and why you would be so deeply seated to the movement, and I'm here to say I'm here. I'm in it. They want to try and screw Bernie and think the progressive movement is just going to go quietly into the night. This is for all of the people going bankrupt and committing suicide due to medical bills. This is for all the students loaded with student debt for trying to better their lives. This is for every single mom working 40, 50, 60 hours a week at minimum wage, not being able to feed their kids and keep a roof over their heads. This is for the earth and our air and water and food. This is for us, not me. Love you guys. We are in the fight of our lives, and I'm here with you. So Snipey has come to the obvious conclusion, and we have hundreds of new pledge takers in the last few days, and that's why. If you want to join Snipey, go to BernieOrBust2020.us and take the Bernie or Bust pledge. If there's any way to turn around this horrible tide, that's how to do it. Make no mistake, the cabal has enormous power. In 3 days, they turned everything around, and our response now is crucial. We can't go quietly into that good night. We must rage against the dying of the light. We must rage on behalf of working class people, and we must rage on behalf of our planet.
Get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernie or Bust train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.